character had impelled Buzz to learn the crucial importance of belonging, of being owned, and of being loyal. He constructs his own personality by interacting with his peers, the way that Pixar encourages each employee from Lasseter on down to construct his, and sometimes her, own corporate personality. Unlike Buzz, however, Woody is completely outfitted with a personality when he appears in Toy Story. We do not see him in his naive state, that is, in full conformity with his manufactured character, until the scene in Toy Story 2, where he is trapped in the office of the felonious, money-grubbing Al, owner of Al's Toy Barn, stand-in for Mr. Eisman. This episode is all about boxes, the lucite case in which Woody is displayed, the opaque cardboard boxes from which Jessie and the prospector yearn to escape, and, of course, the video box on which Stinky Pete, the old prospector, plays the tape of the 50s TV show Woody's Roundup. Here, the mythic function of the media narrative does not replace some more authentic story. The video recording provides the illusion of a personal narrative and a continuous identity where there is none. Woody's Roundup does not revive memories, it makes them. The video adventures never happened to this Woody, but to another Woody, which is not only a distinct article, like each boxed and shelved Buzz Lightyear, but a different species, as different as a puppet is from a toy. What is peculiar about the video is that our Woody so easily identifies with someone else's Woody on the screen as if it really were an earlier version of the self that had evolved, metamorphosed, or somehow acquired a personality, but it isn't and it hasn't. There's no video of a blue fairy appearing to transform Woody the puppet into Woody the toy. Cultural memory is false memory. Watching Woody's Roundup, our Woody revels in the fact that Woody, now in scare quotes, was once a performer who, like Pinocchio in the hands of Stromboli, was a money machine for the various companies whose products he advertised. Had Woody made the Pinocchio connection, he would have noticed that unlike the toy he is, the Woody on the Roundup is a puppet. There he is bested by Pinocchio, for the performing Woody has strings. The performing Pinocchio did not. The video representation of Woody the puppet so effectively mediates lapsed time and distance that the option of regression seems as easy as turning on the remote and as appealing as climbing back into his own lucite box to be shipped and shelved at the Warren Museum, where, abstracted from the culture that has given him personality, a toy can fantasize that he will forever enjoy the regard of people to whom he is a pristine relic of another world and time, guaranteed value by his rarity and immortality by his value. A fantasy that is the only symptom of a subjectivity that differs at all from that of the moth suspended in amber that would almost certainly be on display in the next room. Woody and the gang eventually make the mistake and return to Woody Andy's bedroom. And what happened to Pixar? How do we get from there, that is, a Pixar independent of everyone except its shareholders, to here, a semi-autonomous subsidiary of Walt Disney Company, or for that matter, from there, laboring under a limited contract with an implacable money machine run by the autocratic Michael Eisner, to here, ownership by a moral money machine run by the indulgent Robert Iger? Well, you could pray to the Supreme Court, but Geppetto prayed to the Blue Fairy. Their interventions amount to the same thing. There is indeed no evidence that Pinocchio has internalized an agency that can replace Jiminy Cricket as Scold. None in the movie. None. He never takes Jiminy's advice once. And there's no reason to believe that he will. The Blue Fairies decree that Pinocchio has proven brave, truthful, and selfless completes, as does the majority opinion in Citizens United, a rescue fantasy for an artificial person who, like the modern corporation, is himself unable to accomplish the desired moral evolution of internalizing mens rea. Instead of getting a conscience, the artificial person gets translated to another state, boyhood for Pinocchio, citizenship for the corporation. For the latter, the problem of conscience is mooted by a judicial decree that protects corporate speech, including whatever lies it may be convenient to tell. The Roberts Court has decided that the conscienceless corporation should have all the rights and privileges of a citizen and none of the obligations. That is, though transformed into a real person, the corporation still has no strings to tie it down. In Citizens United, the majority opinion refused to separate the issue of corporate speech from corporate authorship. Contrarily, I have been arguing that under the corporatist regime, authorship's difference from speaking is the capacity not only to take responsibility for what it makes, but to accept liability for its making. Now, where do we find this corporate author? No surprises. As a child of Disney, I have a ready answer. Let your conscience be your guide. If it makes no difference who is speaking, it might as well be a cricket who can tell right from wrong and who can convincingly impersonate the corporate author. Pinocchio is ultimately Jiminy Cricket's story. The movie begins and ends with his direct address to the audience, the first in Disney's history, and with his physical framing of the narrative, which he initiates by opening a book, and which he concludes by closing the window frame to set the stage for his departure to other venues where he can carry out his office. Mickey Mouse Club, for one. Unmistakably, the significance of Jiminy as conscience is that he is not internalized by Pinocchio or by the narrative. A corporation cannot internalize a conscience or anything else. And it is becoming less clear that other persons can either. Jiminy Cricket is not the part that stands for the Disney whole. No part can legitimately stand for the corporate whole. Corporation, however, can incorporate, just as Disney did with Jiminy Cricket, and just as Jiminy incorporates Collodi's story into Disney's picture. Although Pinocchio the puppet is not shelved during the movie, the narrative named Pinocchio is, in the form of the large red book with the silhouette of Pinocchio on the cover, which Jiminy Cricket opens. There is no title page, no frontispiece, no acknowledgement of Collodi, no words at all. What does it matter who speaks? Just a framed image of a sleeping village within the frame of the book's page. This is remarkably different from any book in which Collodi's story might appear. It's a book that only Disney could produce with its animators, its multiplane technology, and technicolor. Jiminy is the figure of an author who can incorporate the fairy tales while fully reimagining them, who can break with tradition even while celebrating it, who can visualize a book of visuals without needing to write one, and who, ideally, would not just receive credit and revenue for his products, but who would also accept liability if something, Blue Fairy help us, should go wrong. A marvelous toy, Pixar always wanted to be owned, whether by George Lucas of Industrial Light and Magic, who was a neglectful father, or by, or by Big Brother Steve Jobs. Now that really is a slip, isn't it? 1984, by the 1984 commercial. Let's get back to task at hand. By brotherly Steve Jobs, who redeemed Pixar from neglect and eventually arranged the merger that would attach Pixar to Walt Disney under terms that would maintain its culture. What are they maintaining? Victor Fleischer, the most informed commentator on the deal, is skeptical that what he calls Pixar's bottom-up culture can be maintained under a contract that subjects the execution of all agreements to the discretion of the executive at the top of the Walt Disney Company. It's really an acquisition, not a merger. Which under Eisner, that chief executive, was known more for breaking contracts than keeping them. Jeffrey Katzenberg's firing being the most famous example. You owe me money. Yeah, you're right, I owe you money. So sue me. Fleischer warns that the omission of any mention of the well-publicized Pixar University Fleischer warns that the omission of any mention of the well-publicized Pixar University has been adduced as evidence that distinctive elements of Pixar's culture were already being abandoned before the contract was signed. Little pieces of our identity. Only the reification of Pixar's culture, however, makes it possible for Fleischer to inventory what is in Disney's basement. Indeed, it was Fleischer who first pointed to the importance of the quotation marks around culture in Exhibit 99.1, and who astutely associated that form with the way that the intangible managerial capital called goodwill was once represented in contracts, a form of fictitious capital earlier. The association of culture with goodwill is telling, because the quotation marks around goodwill were eventually dropped as accounting methods were adopted that made that capacious intangible accountable, and because by asserting itself as author, Pixar culture claims to be able to generate both good products and goodwill. For Iger to squeeze out that culture would be Eisner-like to deliberately destroy that value, both by driving away indispensable talent and by disabling the institutionally specific protocols shared by techies and creatives who combine to author the motion pictures that generate goodwill. The insistence on the maintenance of the culture in the contract is then an assertion of a cultural authorship of incalculable value. Because as long as Pixar knows right from wrong and conscientiously does things right, one must trust that its culture will be indefinitely productive of more value. Indeed, rather than facilitating the imposition of Disney ideology on Pixar, the merger has been followed by influence heading the other way. And significantly, not only on the animators. Recently, Iger, for example, has summoned Pixar members to conferences on Tron Legacy and Muppet movie conferences on live action productions in order to exploit their narrative expertise in order to get their stories right. Coming to my conclusion, and encouraging you to skip the dirty work of inventorying these sort of policies, practices, properties, and personalities that constitute Pixar culture. For although some of these are important, none is either necessary or sufficient. My construction of Pixar theory has exploited the peculiar appearance of a framed culture in the merger contract to avoid what I believe Pixar was also avoiding, being boxed in by a Hobson's choice between the demystification of Pixar as ultimately the studio of John Lasseter, auteur, and the alternative hypothesis of Pixar as culture as a medium for the formation of a collective identity and a technology for enforcing brand discipline. Cultural authorship can't survive at either extreme. Extremes must meet, and